Good morning and welcome to your Monday morning espresso shot. Happy to have you here this week. So let us get going. Uh, Begin by, as we always do, placing our awareness in the area of the heart. Let us begin there first. Placing our awareness in the area of the heart, taking slow, deep breaths. And just imagine these breaths flowing in and out of our hearts. Just taking these slow, deep, gentle, nourishing breaths to balance our autonomic nervous system. Slow, deep, gentle breaths. And take your time with these breaths. Make them symmetrical. 5 seconds breath in, 5 seconds breath out. If it feels right, take the breaths even deeper as you visualize them flowing into your heart and down to your root chakra and perineum. And then exhale from your root chakra or perineum out through your mouth. You'll be breathing from your nose and your mouth. But if you just imagine these breaths flowing into your heart and flowing out of your heart, it'll keep your body activated, your autonomic nervous system balanced. Slow, deep, gentle breaths. The deeper you breathe, the more oxygen gets to be distributed in the rest of your body. Now, gently open your eyes if you had them closed. And keep breathing in the way that you are breathing. There's no reason to stop taking those deep breaths as you're listening to this. And certainly type in your reflections if you have any comments or questions. But today I wanted to share, to kind of um, talk to you about managing grief and one breath at a time. And the reason what happens is with grief, you are having short breaths and shallow breaths. So we must recognize that. Well, let's talk about the sources of grief, and I'll mention a few only, and there's probably a lot more. So the sources of grief, as many of us have actually experienced, is, the obvious one is passing of a loved one, death in the family, or death of a friend. Grief is when something happens to somebody that impacts you directly, whether they die or whether they have a misfortune, etc. And you're feeling for them, especially if you're an empath and you feel everybody's emotions. There's another level of grief that is worthwhile noting here that we need to acknowledge as well. It's a grief of somebody moving on with their lives. So, for example, if you ever have to change a job or leave a particular line of work to go to the next one or change your career, there is a level of grief associated with that. There's a level of grief associated with the fact that you may be approaching the end of your particular career and you're thinking, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something different that fills my heart more than it did before, because the joy factor is not there. There's a level of grief there because the grief is about leaving the past, and then the fear of moving into the future. There's a bit of mixture of emotions. The one that I identify with most is the grief of my children no longer being children. So, for example, I was at a place yesterday where I saw a young 6-year-old girl performing voluntary duties, taking stuff from one side in the kitchen to the table. And she was doing this and very, with a smile on her face. She felt like she was doing something wonderfully useful. She felt so appreciated. And she really loved what she was doing because she felt she was contributing. And I reflected, this was like 18 years ago for me, when my child was that young, my daughters. That's what they were doing. They were doing exactly the same thing in a similar setting. And I felt grief because I felt grief that I was no longer able to savor the moments. And I wish time had stopped when my children were that young, that I could savor them some more. And there's a bit of grief that I recognized and I realized it at that time. So grief comes in many forms. And the most important thing for us to do is to first recognize this is grief. Once you acknowledge that I'm experiencing grief, then what happens is your pathway opens up, your neural pathway opens up, because there's a feeling center at the base of your brain that if it does not recognize the emotion, and if you're just confused about the emotion, is it grief, is it guilt, is it sadness, what is it? If you don't target the emotion, what it does is it doesn't process properly and allow you to clearly think forward. And because I was able to recognize this as grief, I was able to then take the deep breaths, which is what we practice here. Is as soon as you recognize the grief, what you do is you take that scenario of that child, in my case was the child, and saying, I miss my daughters when they were young. They're old now in their 20s. And I would go back and reflect on my enjoyment in that moment with that child and take those deep breaths in. When somebody has passed and you're grieving for them, then the time then is to reflect back on the times that you had with them and savor those moments. It's all about savoring the moments that were there that allows you to move forward to then invite new moments with other people or with other situations. So when you actually go back into your heart and begin to experience joy that you had in that moment with them, the body does not recognize whether this was happening in the past or whether it is happening currently or in the future. The body just listens to what you are feeling, if that's a word, and releases the chemicals that are appropriate for you inviting those emotions, evoking those emotions. So if you're, for me, going back into that time when I was with my daughters, I was holding them in my arms. They were young, tandem holding them. It brought me so much joy that I was able to now process this grief properly. And I invite you to try that. And of course, we do that every week with me here, and we practice that and we apply it for different situations. So let us see what we can do next. If we have a grief that we want to overcome, I invite you in this next practice to actually go into that feeling of gratitude and appreciation. Go back to the moments when you've had an elated feeling with that individual or that situation, and breathe that into your heart, and your body will release the chemicals as if it's happening right now. So you'll stop time, you will reverse time, and you will go back into that moment. Let us try that. Let us practice that by placing our awareness in the area of the heart, taking slow, deep, gentle breaths. And now experiencing these breaths flowing in and out of our hearts, breathing a little slower, a little gentler than you normally would. And as you take these slow, deep, gentle breaths, reflect on joy and appreciation and the moments you spend with the individual or the situation that brought you to a state of love and gratitude. And allow the chemicals in your body to be released. Anti-aging, rejuvenating hormones, healing properties of DHEA hormone being released in your body, countering any chronic conditions, any pain. And the more intensity you experience this joy and love and gratitude, the more richer the chemicals will be. And the energy field holding the disease in place will begin to become disassembled and being replaced by a more coherent form of energy. Slow, deep, gentle breaths with love and gratitude infused in the heart, drawing deep breaths down to your perineum and out from your perineum, out of the heart. Can you reach for a higher intensity of gratitude and appreciation? Just set the intention to experience a more deeper, more intense form of gratitude and appreciation. Now open your eyes if you had them closed. Thank you so much for joining me today. If there are any questions or reflections, please type them into the chat area. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today. If I can help you one-on-one to help you overcome any obstacles you're facing, I can certainly work with you on that. If there are any questions, now's the time to ask. You're welcome, Randy. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you. All right, nothing else coming through. So then I'll bid you goodbye for now. Take care and all the best for the week, and I'll see you next week. Take care for now.